A thin veil of mist parted before the descending transport shuttle, revealing the shimmering forests of Aetheris below. Ethan pressed his forehead to the window, heart pounding with a mixture of trepidation and awe. Even through the tinted glass, he could see sunlight scattering into rainbow hues as it refracted against the planet's renowned crystalline rivers. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their approach to the landing platform in Vaelari, Aetheris's capital city. He gulped quietly, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions. This was to be his home for the next year, part of an intergalactic exchange program between Earth and the Vaelari, a species as renowned for their empathy and spirituality as they were for their stunning blue skin and elegant culture. Throughout his long journey, Ethan had scoured every available text and briefing about the Vaelari, their customs, and their philosophies. Yet somehow, no amount of reading truly prepared him for this. The moment of arrival felt surreal, as though he were stepping into an ancient myth rendered reality. In his mind, he kept returning to the detail that had most intrigued and admittedly unnerved him. He would be sharing quarters with a Vaelari woman named Seris. The arrangement was intended to foster cross-cultural understanding. After all, the Vaelari prided themselves on transparent emotional communion. But for Ethan, a solitary type at heart, rarely at ease even among fellow humans, this arrangement sounded daunting. Moreover, the Vaelari's empathic abilities were famous. They could sense the emotions of others with astonishing clarity. What might that mean for him, a man who had long ago learned to keep his inner life neatly locked away? With a soft thud, the shuttle made contact with the landing platform. Outside, great stone spires rose in mesmerizing spirals, reminiscent of ancient cathedrals. But unlike the monoliths of Earth, these towers seemed almost to pulse with life. Luminescent vines clung to every surface, forming intricate patterns that pulsed with azure radiance under the sun's rays. The swirling design of the city was such that nature and architecture appeared intertwined, each element coexisting in seamless harmony. Stepping onto the surface of Aetheris, Ethan felt a sudden shift in the air. It was dense, fragrant with subtle, flowery scents. He inhaled tentatively, struck by an immediate sense of calm. Despite the throng of Vaelari greeting the newly arrived humans, there was none of the customary hustle or loud chatter one might expect on Earth. Instead, the welcoming atmosphere was quiet, almost reverent, as if each individual presence contributed to a collective aura of tranquility. The group of human travelers advanced to a polished courtyard lined with arching trees whose leaves shimmered like emerald glass. Various Vaelari awaited them, each dressed in robes of flowing fabric that captured the light in spectral patterns. Their skin was a soft, glimmering shade of blue, ranging from a pastel hue in the young to deeper, more vibrant tones in the elders. Dark eyes reflected curiosity and warmth in equal measure. A tall Vaelari man stepped forward. His voice carried a gentle cadence, oddly resonant, despite being spoken in a language Ethan only half understood. Moments later, a small translating device at Ethan's belt beeped, delivering the message in English. "Welcome to Aetheris. We greet you with open hearts and hope you find our ways enlightening. You honor us with your presence." Ethan bowed slightly, mirroring the Vaelari gesture he had studied. This prompted gracious smiles. One Vaelari woman with shining indigo skin took a step closer, carrying a slim crystal rod. She appeared to cross-reference something on a floating holographic display, then turned to Ethan. He recognized his name, spoken in that melodic tone unique to the Vaelari tongue. "Yes, that's me," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. She nodded in understanding and beckoned him to follow. As they navigated through the courtyard, Ethan marveled at the swirling mosaic beneath his feet. Tiny shards of prismatic stone were arranged in patterns that caught the sunlight, creating a continuous shimmer that guided their steps deeper into the city. The woman introduced herself as Vaelana, one of the Vaelari coordinators of the exchange. She led Ethan along a wide promenade that curved gracefully, lined on either side by softly glowing lanterns. Overhead, broad trees formed a living canopy, the leaves chiming gently in the soft breeze. "It is our custom," Vaelana said, "to provide each visitor with a comfortable living space in the heart of our city. You will share your quarters with one of our own, Seris. She is Well, how best to describe her? Seris is esteemed for her empathy and her dedication to the old ways. We believe that living together in mutual respect fosters a deep, genuine understanding. Ethan nodded, though his heart thumped faster. Every step into the city's interior felt like delving into a dream. The architecture was fluid and organic, as though grown rather than constructed. Buildings were not mere edifices of stone, but living networks of branches and crystal, shaped lovingly over time. Even the wide thoroughfares exuded gentle, musical hums, some unknown property of Vaelari craftsmanship. They continued until they reached a large, open plaza. In its center was a pool of transparent water set among pale marble pillars. The water glowed faintly, reflecting drifting sparks of white and azure light. Vaelana stopped there, turning to Ethan with a gentle smile. Your quarters are within the towers beyond this pool. I trust you can find your way. Seris has been informed of your arrival. Before Ethan could answer, Vaelana placed a slender hand over her heart in a traditional Vaelari gesture of blessing. She then departed, leaving him to absorb the magnificent surroundings. For a moment, he took in every detail. The shimmering ripples in the pool, the graceful arcs of the distant towers, and the sense of gentle energy that seemed to emanate from every surface in this alien city. Gathering his resolve, Ethan started toward the tower indicated on his handheld map. It was a slender column, branching out like a tree near its upper levels. At the base, an open archway led into what might pass for a communal lobby. A few Vaelari lounged on reclined seats, each wearing an expression of tranquil contentment. He noticed how they glanced at him, offering polite nods, but no overt stares. He wondered if they could already sense his anxious curiosity. With a deep breath, Ethan entered the tower and proceeded to the lift, a softly illuminated platform that ascended without any visible mechanism. His reflection in the tower's interior surfaces startled him. He looked downright drab compared to the Vaelari, standard-issue gray jumpsuit, a bit wrinkled from the journey, and short brown hair that stuck out in odd directions. In a race known for their slender, graceful physiques, he felt all the more self-conscious, stocky, human, out of place. The lift glided upward, eventually opening into a short hallway. According to the symbols on his device, this was his designated floor. At the end of the corridor, an ornately carved door slid aside with a gentle swoosh. Inside, Ethan caught a glimpse of airy rooms bathed in golden sunlight. He stepped forward cautiously, unsure if he should call out. A melodic voice reached him before he could speak. You must be Ethan. I felt you coming. The lilt was warm, inviting, and it resonated in a way that made the fine hairs on his arms stand on end. Standing in the middle of the spacious living area was Seris, his new roommate. Her skin was the color of a twilight sky, the smooth hue accentuated by delicate silver markings along her arms and collarbone. Tattoos, or perhaps natural patterns, Ethan couldn't quite tell. She wore a fluid, ivory robe that glimmered faintly, and her dark eyes were indeed piercing, exactly as the program's briefing had described. But they weren't unkind. They appeared to hold wisdom laced with curiosity, like someone who had lived many stories yet was eager to learn a new one. He nodded stiffly, forcing a smile. I'm Ethan. It's a pleasure to meet you, Seris. She approached with a poised step, placing a hand gently over her heart. Welcome to our home. May peace dwell within these walls. It was a formal Vaelari greeting, one that Ethan had practiced in training. He attempted to mirror the gesture, right palm over the chest, a slight dip of the head, though his movements felt awkward. Her smile grew warmer, as if acknowledging his effort without mockery. Ethan scanned the living area. Curved walls joined seamlessly with the ceiling. Translucent panels let in the glow of Aetheris's twin suns. The floor was smooth, made from some faintly iridescent material, and the furniture, if one could call it that, seemed grown organically from the walls in gentle slopes and arches. In a corner, a single, more traditional seat was provided for his human frame, shaped with a backrest and sturdy legs. You have traveled far, Seris continued, her voice almost lyrical. I sensed your discomfort even as you stepped off the transport. Are you well? Does our atmosphere trouble your breathing? Ethan quickly shook his head, cheeks flushing. No, it's not that. The air here is actually quite pleasant. I'm just nervous, I suppose. Oh, She gazed at him with a soft, penetrating look, as though understanding every nuance of his statement. The heart is often uneasy in unfamiliar places. Her tone was gentle. But please know, you are not alone. This is your home as much as it is mine. He cleared his throat, feeling unaccustomed to such direct empathy. Thank you. I appreciate it. Seris gestured for him to follow, showing him to his sleeping chamber, a partially enclosed alcove with a bed molded from a smooth, pliant material that reminded Ethan of memory foam. The bed was draped in shimmering cloth that changed color depending on the angle of the light. Along the curved wall, a panel displayed scenic views of Aetheris, presumably controllable by voice or some unseen system. As Seris departed to let him unpack, Ethan took a moment to gather himself. Had she truly sensed his nervousness from across the room? The Vaelari were empathic, yes, but the depth of this gift was startling in person. He exhaled, trying to settle his mind. First days on Aetheris. Over the next few days, Ethan immersed himself in orientation sessions. Each day, he and the other human exchange participants attended lectures given by Vaelari scholars who explained the intricacies of local customs, belief systems, and societal structures. He learned that the Vaelari perceived emotional energies as clearly as humans perceive temperature or humidity. Harmony among them wasn't just an ideal, it was practically a physiological necessity. Discordant emotions could spread through their empathic network and cause widespread distress. At mealtimes, Ethan observed that his colleagues, too, struggled with adjusting to Vaelari cuisine, delicate strands of luminescent algae, succulent fruits that radiated faint electric pulses, and sipping warm beverages that thrummed softly upon contact with the tongue. But the Vaelari were unfailingly patient, eager to show the new arrivals how to handle each unfamiliar dish, always encouraging them to remain open to new experiences. During these initial days, Seris rarely intruded upon his personal space, recognizing perhaps that her presence could be overwhelming. She was present, though, a soothing anchor in this sea of unfamiliarity. Often, when Ethan returned from a day of orientation, he found her kneeling on a plush mat, eyes closed, in silent communion with the energies around her. Sometimes she sang in low, resonant tones that reverberated through the living space, reminding Ethan of ancient Earth lullabies, distant and beautiful. They exchanged polite greetings and brief conversations. Seris would ask questions, always with genuine interest, about Earth and its myriad cultures. Ethan would attempt to describe the frantic pace of Earth's major cities, how technology had shaped human society, and what it felt like to be part of a species so large and diverse that conflicts could arise with alarming frequency. She, in turn, spoke of Aetheris's balance, how the Vaelari believed the entire planet was alive in a spiritual sense, resonating with the emotional states of its inhabitants. With unwavering sincerity, Seris explained that a single strong emotion could influence the subtle energies of the environment. It was why Vaelari children were taught from an early age to be mindful of their emotional output. Yet, even as they formed a tentative bond, Ethan sensed an undercurrent he couldn't quite name. Her empathetic nature was constant, and while he did not feel scrutinized, he was acutely aware that his emotions were more transparent to her than to any other being he had ever met. The moment everything changed. On a particularly warm evening, though Aetheris lacked the harsh extremes of Earth's seasons, Ethan returned to their shared quarters exhausted. His orientation session had run longer than usual, culminating in an intense discussion about the Vaelari's more esoteric traditions. The complexities of their empathic bonding ceremonies, family structures, and spiritual rituals had left him feeling mentally drained. He wanted nothing more than a quiet hour alone to decompress. Seris was out, something about an appointment in the city's central district. He didn't dwell on it. With a weary sigh, he entered his alcove, quickly stripped off his jumpsuit, and let himself sink onto the bed, arms splayed out as he tried to gather his thoughts. Usually, the Vaelari maintained a certain level of modesty, though it was quite different from human norms. Nudity among them was not considered shameful, but it was also not casual. It bore a sacred connotation of vulnerability and trust, symbolizing unity with others and with the planet's energies. But Ethan, coming from a culture that was cautious about bodily exposure, had grown used to privacy. He had not expected Seris to return so soon. nor had he given any warning or locked the door. Exhaustion claimed him, and he drifted into a light doze. He awoke abruptly to the sound of the door panel sliding open. A subtle breeze drifted through the room, carrying with it the faint citrus-like scent that always accompanied Seris. Before he could even sit up, she was there in the doorway, motionless, eyes wide with surprise. An electric jolt of panic seized him. He reflexively reached for a blanket, but it was bunched up near his legs. His entire body went rigid. Seris, for her part, did not shriek or turn away. Instead, her gaze flickered over him, and a subtle shift in her expression told him she was feeling his alarm, his embarrassment. A flush of empathy crossed her features, and she placed a hand over her heart, murmuring something soft in her language. Then, quietly, she stepped back out and closed the door behind her, leaving Ethan sitting there in the heavy, suffocating silence. For a long moment, he couldn't move, breath shallow in his lungs. The emotion that churned inside him was not just embarrassment. It was also confusion, because part of him had sensed something else radiating from Seris at that moment. A wave of deep compassion, concern, and something more. Something akin to affection, or perhaps a gentle longing. Yet the sheer intensity of the moment left him reeling. Eventually, Ethan managed to get dressed. When he emerged, he found Seris in the living area, standing near the large arched window that overlooked the city. She was very still, as if listening to something distant. The tension in the air was palpable. She turned as he approached, a slight tremor in her dark eyes. I'm sorry, he stammered, feeling his cheeks heat once more. I should have locked the door. I didn't think you'd be back so soon. She bowed her head gracefully. No apologies needed, Ethan. I trespassed on a private moment. I felt your weariness upon my return, but I did not realize you were so unprepared for visitors. Her tone carried no blame, only empathy. But Ethan still felt a knot in his stomach. I know you see nudity differently. For humans, it's usually a private matter, though not sacred, exactly. More like, we cover ourselves to keep a part of our physical self only for us. Her eyes flickered with understanding. Yes, it is different for us. Nudity among the Vaelari is often reserved for moments of profound trust or spiritual ceremonies. It symbolizes a willingness to be utterly transparent, physically and emotionally. Ethan nodded slowly, recalling the lessons from orientation. I remember. It's still difficult to wrap my head around. I just didn't mean to offend or disrupt. You did not offend me, she interrupted softly, taking a step closer. I only wish I had not intruded. I worry I have unsettled you. I could feel your shock, your vulnerability. And in that moment, I felt something else too. He swallowed hard, heart pounding. Yeah, I wasn't sure how to process it, but I thought I sensed something from you. Like sympathy. She tilted her head, the faint glow of the city lights illuminating her delicate features. More than sympathy, it was a closeness, a resonance. In that moment, our energies aligned, if only briefly. I felt your fear, but also your warmth and sincerity. To see you in that state, unguarded, it touched me deeply. Among my people, seeing one another in such an unguarded way is a sacred bond. Ethan had no ready reply. His mouth was dry, and all the carefully rehearsed phrases he'd learned in orientation seemed to dissolve in the face of this direct emotional honesty. He forced himself to meet her gaze. I don't fully understand, Seris, but I want to. I promise I won't run from this conversation. She offered a gentle, reassuring smile. That is all I ask. Perhaps in time, we can turn this awkward moment into something that bonds us rather than divides us. And with that statement, something subtle yet irrevocable shifted between them. A fragile connection had been forged, one that Ethan felt with a clarity that surprised him. Even if they never spoke of the incident again, he sensed it would color their every interaction from this day onward. Growing closer, over the following weeks, Ethan noticed a tangible difference in his relationship with Seris. Their daily routines continued much as before, both attending their respective activities, occasionally sharing meals, and conversing late into the night about the wonders of each other's worlds. But there was a new layer of openness, an unspoken thread binding them. Once, after a particularly frustrating day, he'd struggled with Vaelari language lessons and felt incompetent. Seris sensed his discouragement before he could say a word. She coaxed him to join her in a meditative practice near the city's central fountain. As they sat side by side on sculpted stone benches, she showed him how to regulate his breathing in rhythm with the gentle ripple of water. Her voice guided him to release the tension in his mind. By the end of that session, Ethan felt oddly light, as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. When she placed a hand on his arm, a warm current of empathy flowed between them, dissolving the last vestiges of his frustration. During these meditative moments, he realized just how potent Vaelari empathy could be. More than once, tears came to his eyes from the sheer solace he felt under her gentle guidance. Her unwavering compassion was not forced or artificial. It was as natural to her as breathing. In turn, Ethan shared bits of human culture that captivated Seris. He used a hollow projector to show her images of Earth's varied landscapes, towering skyscrapers beside bustling streets, ancient cathedrals next to neon-lit roads, deserts that stretched to the horizon, and frozen tundras blanketed in white. She would watch these projections with rapt attention, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed her curiosity about how humans could live in such rapid, often chaotic environments. Sometimes, he tried to describe Earth's version of music, playing samples through a small speaker device. Seris listened, her eyes half closed, clearly intrigued by the interplay of rhythm and melody. She would hum along, her empathic sense likely allowing her to feel the emotional undertones of each piece. He was especially delighted when she declared her love for a centuries-old classical composition. She said it resonated with her soul, stirring a joyful sorrow that she found beautiful. And in these daily interactions, both small and large, they began forging a bond of respect and sincere affection. Yet neither spoke explicitly about the depth of that bond. Perhaps Ethan was too hesitant, unsure if he was reading the signals correctly. Maybe Seris felt it would be presumptuous to push him further than he was ready to go. They were each walking a fine line, human reserve on one side, Vaelari openness on the other, learning that bridging the gap required both vulnerability and patience. The confession. Things came to a head one evening during a festival. Vaera was ablaze with color and sound, the Vaelari celebrating the alignment of Aetheris's twin suns at a specific angle that occurred only once every few months. Ethan joined Seris as she guided him through the winding streets, each corner unveiling a new spectacle. Vaelari dancers garbed in iridescent robes, their bodies moving in fluid patterns that mimicked the cosmic motions of celestial bodies. Stalls offering exotic delicacies that glowed or crackled with faint energy, and overhead, floating lanterns released by celebrants, bobbing among the branches of living architecture. The air pulsed with a palpable vibrancy. Even a human with no empathic gifts could sense the communal joy, magnified by the presence of thousands of Vaelari. Now and then, Ethan felt jolts of euphoria wash over him, likely the ambient waves of empathy saturating the atmosphere. They strolled along a path flanked by lantern-lit ponds, the water reflecting the swirling lights overhead. Seris paused near an ancient tree whose trunk shimmered with embedded crystals. She turned to him with a look of seriousness that contrasted the festive backdrop. "There is something I must tell you," she began softly, her voice trembling just enough for him to notice. "I've been struggling to find the right time." Instinctively, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can tell me anything, Seris. I'm here to listen." She exhaled, and he could practically feel her apprehension, like a ripple in the air. "You remember the day I walked in on you, during that vulnerable moment?" Ethan swallowed, nodding. "Yes, it's hard to forget." Her gaze dropped to the ground, then rose again to meet his eyes with a fierce sincerity. "Among my people, there is a custom. When one inadvertently witnesses another in that sacred state, it is believed that a portion of each soul is revealed to the other. If the moment is met with an open heart, it can bind them emotionally. You may think this is just metaphor, but to the Vaelari, it is more than a superstition. It is an ancient truth." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "What does that mean for us?" "It means that since that day, I have felt you more strongly than I feel many of my own people. Your emotions reach me with startling clarity, as though there is a direct path from your heart to mine. I can sense your joys, your doubts. And you, though you do not share our empathic gift, I believe you have also felt the shift." He took a breath, remembering the intense closeness he sometimes felt in her presence, the way her empathy seemed to wrap around him like a comforting blanket. I have felt something, as if I can guess your thoughts or emotions before you speak them. It's faint, but it's there. Seris nodded, a soft glow of relief crossing her features. Yes, that is the bond. It is not fully formed. Sometimes such a connection remains dormant if it is not nurtured. But other times, if both hearts are willing, it blossoms into what we call the Vaelari Aetheris, the merging of souls. His eyes widened. He had read of this, a phenomenon often romanticized in Vaelari lore, but seldom experienced between a Vaelari and a human. Are you saying this is happening to us? She stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could see the faint silver patterns on her skin. I believe it is, and it is why I have struggled with my emotions. I am drawn to you, Ethan, in a way that surpasses mere friendship. I know we are different, but you have awakened feelings in me that are difficult to ignore. Blood pounded in his ears. He could hardly breathe from the sheer intensity of the moment. Her confession was everything he had suspected, yet never dared to confirm. Seris, he paused, words choking in his throat. I feel drawn to you too, more than I can articulate. I came to Aetheris expecting a cultural exchange, but I never expected this. Tears glimmered in her dark eyes. Nor did I, but I will not deny it. My only fear is that perhaps this is too much for you, that you might feel pressured or overwhelmed. Ethan placed a gentle hand against her cheek. The warmth of her skin seemed to course through him like an electric current. Seris, you don't have to fear that. Yes, it's overwhelming, but I want to explore this with you. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch with a quiet sigh of relief. Thank you. They stood there for a long time, the festival dancing around them, as if the swirling lights and joyous music recognized their union. Ethan felt the intangible bond between them grow stronger, and for once, he did not fight it. He surrendered to this alien closeness, letting it fill his heart with a sense of awe and acceptance he hadn't known he needed. A choice to remain. In the weeks that followed, the closeness between Ethan and Seris bloomed into a gentle intimacy that permeated every aspect of their shared life. They continued living together, but now their daily routines involved shared meditations, quiet dinners where they spoke softly of fears and dreams, and heartfelt conversations about what it meant for a Vaelari and a human to connect on such a profound level. Ethan's official term on Aetheris was set for 1 year. Though he was not yet halfway through, the question of what would happen afterward hung in the air. He could sense it in Seris's eyes when she watched him with a combination of love and sorrow, knowing that eventually, he might have to leave. The more he learned about the Vaelari, their spiritual beliefs, and the synergy of their empathic culture, the more enthralled he became. It wasn't just Seris, though she was the catalyst. It was the entire way of life. Their art, their respect for nature, the calm gentleness with which they approached even the simplest tasks. He found himself wondering if he could ever return to Earth and feel truly at peace, or if part of his soul would forever remain here among these blue-skinned empaths. Then came a day when Seris approached him with solemn determination. They sat across from each other in their living area, sunlight from the twin suns spilling through the translucent walls in arcs of gold. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. Ethan, there is a tradition among my people, the ritual of binding. It formalizes a bond like ours, making it an eternal connection. Once performed, our souls would be linked in a way even death might not sever. It is not done lightly, and never without deep consideration. His heart began to pound. He felt a strange sense of both euphoria and apprehension. That's one of the most sacred Vaelari rites, isn't it? She nodded, eyes grave but hopeful. Yes, it's rarely offered to those outside our species. In fact, I've never heard of it being performed between a Vaelari and a human. But I have read accounts in our archives of bonding across species long ago, during the earliest days of Vaelari exploration. Would it even work? Ethan asked, voice trembling slightly. She took his hands in hers. There is a risk. The ritual of binding requires both participants to open themselves completely, emotionally and spiritually. For Vaelari, it's an intrinsic part of our physiology. For humans, it might be more challenging. There's no guarantee you could tolerate the intensity of the empathic resonance. But if you succeed, we would be joined. A union that transcends time and space. He stared into her dark eyes, feeling that ethereal pull. He realized with startling clarity that he loved her. Even with all the complexities and the alien nature of her world, he wanted to be by her side. Seris, I don't want to lose you. If the only way to truly be together is this ritual, then I'm willing to try. She exhaled, relief flooding her features. You must know it is an irreversible choice. If you undergo the ritual, returning to Earth as though nothing happened will be impossible. Your emotions will be forever linked to mine, even if we're worlds apart. Ethan hesitated, letting the full gravity of her words sink in. He thought of his old life, the bustling cities, his career prospects, his family. Could he truly break away, remain on Aetheris, or at least remain bound to it? Even if duty forced him to return? Perhaps the better question was, did he want to live without this connection? A faint tremor ran through him, but he found his resolve. I understand, and I accept that risk. Seris pressed her forehead against his, a Vaelari gesture of deep affection. Then we shall make preparations. The ritual is performed at dawn, in a sacred grove beyond the city's walls. I will guide you, but you must maintain your resolve. The energies can be overwhelming. He felt both fear and excitement simmer in his chest. I trust you. She smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. And I trust you. The eve of the ritual, word spread quickly among the Vaelari that a human and one of their own intended to undertake the ritual of binding. Some responded with disbelief, others with quiet curiosity, but none displayed overt hostility. The Vaelari approached even the most unexpected events with measured calm, though Ethan noticed more than a few wide-eyed stares as he walked through the streets the evening before the ceremony. A hush seemed to fall over Vera. Or perhaps it was just Ethan's perception, attuned now to the undercurrents of emotion swirling around him. He sensed curiosity, wonder, and cautious hope. A group of Vaelari elders formally visited him and Seris in the early evening. Dressed in shimmering ceremonial robes, they chanted blessings and placed small crystals around the living space. Each crystal said to hold protective energies. Seris translated their words for Ethan. They invoke the guardians of our ancestral lineage, asking them to bless our bond. They pray that the empathic resonance will guide us safely through the transition. He nodded gravely. The process felt dreamlike, but he was determined. The elders departed with kind smiles, leaving the crystals aglow in soft pastel lights. As night fell, Seris and Ethan prepared mentally, spending hours in quiet meditation. She instructed him to focus on his breath, to envision the warmth of her presence beside him, to gently let go of any doubts. Several times, he wavered, thinking of the magnitude of what awaited. Each time, her calm energy soothed him, reminding him of why he had come this far. They spoke little during these final hours, letting the silence cradle them. Words felt too coarse a medium for what they were about to undertake. When at last Ethan drifted into a light sleep, he dreamed of luminous trees whispering secrets in an alien tongue, of cosmic tides surging through his mind, and of Seris's gentle voice guiding him to an uncharted shore. The ritual of binding. At the break of dawn, they left the city in a small hovering transport guided by one of the Vaelari elders. The path led them through forests of shimmering leaves that caught the early light. Crystalline rivers, alive with refracted color, meandered through moss-laden banks. The beauty was overwhelming, a reminder of how unique and wondrous this planet was. They arrived at a secluded grove, ringed by towering trees whose trunks glowed faintly. In the center lay a circular clearing, the ground covered in soft, bioluminescent grass. Ethan noticed carved stones arranged in a pattern around the grove's perimeter, each stone etched with unfamiliar runes that glimmered in the dawn light. A handful of Vaelari gathered, mostly elders, standing quietly. They watched with serene expressions, their empathy focused in support of the ceremony. At the grove's edge, Seris turned to Ethan. Her expression was calm but resolute, the sunlight catching the silvery tattoos on her arms. She wore a simple white garment, one that almost blended with her skin's gentle glow. Ethan took a trembling breath. He wore a Vaelari ceremonial robe, a gift prepared specifically for the ritual. Its fabric felt weightless, as if woven from morning mist. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, a stark counterpoint to the hush of the grove. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. He nodded. "Ready." The elder who guided their transport stepped forward, raising her hands in a gesture of invocation. She began chanting in the Vaelari language, a slow, hypnotic melody that seemed to harmonize with the rustling of the leaves. One by one, the stones around the clearing lit up, forming a ring of soft, pulsating light. Seris guided Ethan to the center, where they both knelt facing each other. She took his hands in hers, her eyes reflecting a mixture of love and solemnity. The elder's chanting grew more complex, weaving multiple tones into a tapestry of sound that resonated in Ethan's chest. "You must open your heart now," Seris said quietly. "Let your barriers fall. Feel my presence." He inhaled deeply, recalling the meditation techniques she had taught him. He focused on the warmth of her hands, the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. He tried to drop the protective walls he'd built over a lifetime, letting his emotions flow freely. Fear, excitement, love, all roiled within him, tangling into an impassioned swirl. Seris's eyes seemed to darken, and a gentle light suffused her skin. "I can feel it," she whispered. "Your heart is open." Suddenly, the circle of stones flared brighter. A low hum filled the air, echoing the elder's chant. Ethan felt a tingling sensation in his arms and chest, as if some invisible current flowed from Seris into him. The hum grew louder, resonating through the grove, and he realized with startling clarity that his emotional essence was merging with hers. The elder stepped closer, holding a slender staff made of crystalline material. She tapped the ground, sending a faint tremor through the clearing. A surge of luminescent energy arced between the stones, converging on Ethan and Seris. He felt it wash over him in waves, first warmth, then a kaleidoscope of emotion. For a split second, he panicked at the intensity, but Seris squeezed his hands reassuringly. He closed his eyes, trusting her, letting go. Images flashed in his mind, Seris's earliest memories, her childhood running through the glowing forests, her mother's face, the heartbreak of a lost friend. He gasped, experiencing her joys and sorrows as if they were his own. Then came a flood of his own memories, drawn forth and presented to her. He felt her compassion, her acceptance of everything he had been, both the good and the flawed. Tears streamed down his face, but he also sensed a profound relief, like unlocking a chamber long sealed. There was no shame here, no rejection, only unity. In that timeless moment, their souls intertwined, forging a link as tangible as sunlight on skin. The energy crescendoed, then slowly began to subside. When he opened his eyes, he saw Seris trembling before him, tears glistening on her cheeks. Yet her smile was radiant, filled with a peace he had never seen. The elder's chant quieted to a soft murmur, and the glowing stones returned to a gentle luminescence. "It is done," the elder pronounced. They are joined. A chorus of soft gasps and murmured blessings rose from the Vaelari onlookers. Ethan tried to speak, but he found himself overwhelmed by sensation. It was as if he could sense Seris inside his mind, a comforting presence that pulsed in tandem with his own heartbeat. Her love, her essence, twined with his, and in that moment, he knew with utter certainty that he was no longer alone. He and Seris leaned into each other's embrace. Around them, the grove felt alive with quiet celebration. A sense of absolute belonging rushed through Ethan, as though the planet itself recognized their union. In the days and weeks that followed, Ethan gradually adjusted to the new bond. He still experienced moments of disorientation, feeling Seris's emotions as strongly as his own. But she guided him gently, teaching him how to regulate the empathic overflow, how to maintain a sense of self while cherishing their unity. News of the ritual of binding spread throughout Aetheris. Whispers circulated of the unprecedented bond between a human and a Vaelari. Some viewed it as a sign of hope for deeper interspecies cooperation. Ethan's human colleagues in the exchange program were astonished, some supportive, others wary. But Ethan no longer felt the old pangs of insecurity. His heart was steady. Eventually, the year of his official exchange term drew near its end. Earth's representatives contacted him, inquiring about his return date. Diplomatic niceties aside, they made it clear they hoped he would continue fostering positive relations by sharing his experiences back on Earth. But the choice was his, and it weighed heavily on his mind. Before deciding, he spoke with Seris at length. She encouraged him to follow his path, whether that meant returning to Earth or finding a way to stay on Aetheris. Their bond was eternal now. It would survive distance, though physical separation would be painful. Ethan spent many restless nights contemplating his future. Part of him yearned to see his family again, to share with them the life-changing experiences he had undergone. Yet another part felt that Aetheris had become home, its tranquil forests and empathic warmth too precious to leave behind. There was also the question of how a bound soul would function away from the land that had nurtured it. In the end, Ethan decided on a compromise. He would visit Earth briefly, to settle his affairs and ensure his loved ones knew he was safe and content. Then he would return to Aetheris. The Vaelari Council, upon hearing his plan, granted him special residency status, a rare honor. They expressed hopes that he would serve as a bridge between their worlds. When the day of parting finally arrived, the transport shuttle soared away from Aetheris, leaving behind the shimmering forests and crystal rivers. Ethan felt an ache in his chest, but also a comforting warmth, Seris's presence within him, reassuring him he was never truly alone. Their bond transcended light years. Even across the stars, their hearts remained connected. Months later, after concluding his visit to Earth, Ethan made good on his promise. He returned to Aetheris. The moment he stepped off the shuttle onto Vaelari soil, he felt a wave of relief, as though he were breathing freely for the first time. Seris awaited him at the platform, her eyes brimming with unshed tears of joy. He ran to her without hesitation. They embraced beneath the sapphire sky, the swirl of empathic energy enveloping them both in familiar warmth. Around them, the Vaelari presence smiled knowingly at the union of two souls that transcended the boundaries of species and distance. Over time, Ethan found new roles to serve in Vera. He helped establish cross-cultural programs between humans and Vaelari, bridging gaps that once seemed insurmountable. His bond with Seris deepened daily, each shared experience weaving them closer together. And while life wasn't always perfect, cultural misunderstandings still arose, and there were moments of homesickness. He never questioned the choice he had made. Every morning, he woke to the soft glow of Aetheris's twin suns, Seris sleeping peacefully beside him, and he felt a quiet, profound gratitude. He had found a love that defied the strictures of biology and distance, and a world that recognized his worth. He was no longer the guarded, lonely man he had once been. He was home. And so, in the sacred grove where they first bound their souls, beneath the gently swaying branches that whispered their blessings, Ethan and Seris would often return to renew their vows of unity. Hand in hand, heart in heart, they walked forward into a future in which two species, two worlds, and two souls had become forever entwined.